we know that training makes you a better athlete, but what aspects of your life play into creating an athlete such as Mr. 50.5 inch over here? That is what we're going to talk about today in this podcast. But before we do that, make sure you go to THPstrength.com and sign up for coaching if you want to be a better athlete. So actually, let me ask you this, Isaiah. What do you define as successful when it comes to jumping? Like if you say, you look at the other aspects that you have, like what do you consider as a success?
I think it's getting within a certain percentage of your athletic potential, your genetic potential.
And what is that percentage?
I don't know.
Like as close, like you've optimized as many things as possible, and you're at that level
like
for many
your
years.
goal, assuming your goal is to jump higher, what are the things aside from programming that need to happen in your brain for you to reach that? Because the programming, theoretically, you could adhere to a program perfectly, but people don't, right? Or the way they train might not be with max intent, or vacation pops up, what's going to make you
not go
and
decide to go
and
back,
prioritize
stay back,
training? Yeah.
So that's a good question. That's a good question. So what we'll call these intangibles, these aspects of life that you have to have, whether it's psychologically or pretty much psychologically, I feel like, right? This is pretty I would say. So or decision making in life. What are some of these aspects? What do you think? I think diet is a big one. Diet's a huge one. I think that is like you don't necessarily struggle with that because you're Mr. 5% body fat, underwater weighing, and you can pretty much walk around at that year round, and yeah, it's fine. Austin and I, on the other hand, we've got fat white guy genetics, and we have to constantly pay attention to fat white guy genetics. Okay.
What's a white guy?
That's a great question. I don't know if I could define that in the scope of this podcast. We are getting so off track right now.
Technically not.
Okay, so what is, to me at least, when it comes to diet, I would say that genetically speaking, I've seen you eat copious amounts of shit and you can sustain a 5% body fat. Even if it's not copious amounts of shit, you eat a ton of calories a day. And you can eat copious amounts of shit and it pretty much has no impact. Whereas Austin and I, we could have our caloric intake, at 2,500 calories a day, satiety dialed in, and we still might have issues with maintaining low body fat percentages. So what do you think in terms of that? How do you view that as an intangible? Do you think that you have more mental resilience because you have a genetic predisposition to that? Or is it just like, if you're in Austin or I's shoes, would you say that we have to have more focus in that sense, or that we're just not as fortunate? How would you view that?
You all aren't as fortunate.
We're the less fortunate?
Yeah. I don't think I have mental
when it comes to diet?
Yeah. I mean, I have
I think you're decently disciplined.
Yeah, because I love candy and I could be eating candy every day, but I stopped myself from.
Well, that's a newer thing, I feel like.
Do you have a vice?
Year or so, right?
Yeah.
Do you have a vice?
Oh.
Vice?
A vice.
Of course, we're going to bring this
Me?
up and hand me the mic.
Do I have a vice?
Yeah, do you have a vice?
Yeah, cereal. Cereal's my vice. I do think I have decent discipline with that because there was a period of time where I tried intermittent fasting and I didn't have an issue with it.
I like intermittent fasting personally.
Yeah.
I do too.
To be fair. So.
But yeah, my vice is definitely candy and cereal.
Mine is literally Asian food, of any sort, just ramen, udon, sushi, anything. I get Asian food from this one bar called Izzyban. I'm a regular there. I sit at the bar and I just eat, and I go there 4 times a week. I work on stuff or I work there. I love it, but I found some healthy options there recently, so be good. And then obviously alcohol. Those are my 2 vices: Asian food and alcohol.
You said obviously alcohol.
I mean, everyone's
I also practice dietary discipline in the form of keeping my environment healthy free.
Snack free.
I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's been times where I've bought like a big ass bag of candy or a box of chips,
throw it
a little
away.
bit, and then I toss it because I literally know if it's in the house and it's unhealthy, it's gonna get eaten.
Yeah.
I can't not, but I know that about myself, so I just don't keep snacks in the house?
So you just reminded me of something. So in 2022, obviously my glory years, I actually found a picture of my scale, and I wasn't 160. I was actually 158, like 157, and I would take pictures of my scale. So I realized I never went out because at the time I wasn't drinking. I had no friends or anything. And I wasn't comfortable going out to eat at all. Now I'm very comfortable just going out to eat by myself and things of that nature. But my whole household environment is set up much like Isaiah's. I don't have any snacks. I don't have anything unhealthy. There's nothing bad at my house. So the biggest thing for me is definitely just like staying home. And I think part of it's anxiety and just boredom. Like I want to go somewhere, and that messes with my diet. But I feel like if you set up the environment, like that's all I was doing. It's like I wasn't drinking when I was super, super lean. I wasn't eating unhealthily, like because the food, there was no unhealthy options. The other thing I would say too is once you get down to a lower body fat percentage, and that's another reason I think you're fine, is it's so much harder to gain it back. Like I remember when my diet was super strict, I got super lean, and then I kind of eased off on my diet, and it took about 8 months until I got hurt, where I was still super shredded, but I was eating kind of whatever I wanted, because you do need to eat a surplus to gain the weight back. Like so, I feel like getting down to that lower body fat percentage is definitely a lot harder than it is to maintain it.
I also, with the going out thing, I would say I have really good discipline with that as well. Like, I like drink. I would say, like, heavily drink, like, you know, like, go out type of thing, like, once or twice a month.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't
Even
really
before
do
I
that.
had, because I have a child, so it's obviously harder to go out, but even before I had a child, like, when we were in 29, because Marines drink a ton, and I actually was drinking, like, my least during that. Like, it was, like, once every 2 months I was going out and, like, drinking.
I think a lot of that is social environment too. Like I definitely started drinking more when I started dating my ex. I started drinking more when you guys came to town, specifically this guy, because he likes a nice brew. Like you know, like it's like a bonding thing. I think a lot of it is your environment more than anything, for sure. I would say that. But yeah, I probably get drunk like once every 2 weeks, like
Drunk.
like drunk. So.
Showing his words. Yeah, I think controlling your environment, as far as we add that as one of the intangibles, I think that plays a really, really big role. Your decision to do things that other people wouldn't do because they like their creature comforts, it plays maybe one of the most important roles, right? Like, I'm even looking at moving, and I'm considering where I move. The number one factor is how close am I to a track and how close am I to a gym that allows me to train effectively. Like most people, that's the last thing that they look at for where they're moving, right? They're going to be like, well, is it safe? Is the house nice? Does it have a pool? Does it have a nice yard? Can I put my furniture in the places that I want? Does it have a lot of sunlight? Like don't get me wrong, I value that stuff, but I'll do that after I select a location that has access to the facilities that I need to train effectively. And I think a lot of people, they don't view it that way. They're like, well, I'm going to sign up for a training program that, will work to and accommodate my needs versus accommodating my life to fit the training program. And I think that the same thing is true of your diet, right? Like recently I just started doing Factor, and Factor is basically it's like cheap meal prep, easy meal prep service. I just wanted to try it, see if I like it. Is the food freaking the best thing I've ever had? No. But is it easy? Is it fast? And does it give me the right macronutrient profile? Absolutely. I can select whether I want a certain amount of protein or carbohydrate, and it's minimum sodium. And that takes care of a lot of the other stuff that I don't necessarily like doing, which is cooking, right? I don't necessarily love cooking. It takes a lot of time. I am a good cook, but I just don't like doing it that much. Specifically, like the amount of time it takes to cook and then clean also, right? Like I like doing it, but I don't want to do it all the time. And, shopping. Shopping is actually probably more of a deterrent for me than cooking itself, is like shopping for the meals that I want to eat.
Which is crazy because there's literally a supermarket walking distance from your apartment. Like,
I still hate it.
Parking lot. Like you could I like shopping at the supermarket. It makes me feel accomplished personally.
No, it just takes too much
I don't
time.
mind it. I like to go. I like to pick some avocados.
Yeah, nice. I like doing that, but when you're doing a meal and it's like, well, you need chili flakes, but you don't need any chili flake. You need this specific chili flake. And there's one thing I've learned if you're new at cooking is do not try to make your own adjustments because it will taste like shit and it will not taste the way it's supposed to. It will not look the way it's supposed to. Just do what the recipe says as written, and
Unless
it will
you're
be perfect.
Could I add something?
Unless you're a chef or Hispanic.
So another thing I do want to mention too that affects, I guess, training quality is your friend group. Having a lot of friends, apart from John and Isaiah, that are not in this walk of life where they're training everything. They go to the gym and stuff, but they're not necessarily worried about athletic performance. There's a lot more peer pressure, and I'm not saying they're bad people. They don't get why I want to go to bed early. They don't get why I don't want to drink on a Wednesday. They don't get why I don't want to go out to eat and do this and that. And it's hard because it's so normal for them, and they make you feel crazy, and it's easy to fold. They'll be like, oh, like you don't want to go on this cruise, like oh, you don't want to do this. It's like it's because I want to train, and my walk of life is much different than yours, and they think it's like a lot of people take it personal, and it's easy to be pressured. So be careful with that.
So that's why I had no friends.
Yes.
You have some friends, just the ones that agree with you.
Okay.
I'm like, you're not disciplined and motivated? You're not my friend.
There's some truth to that. There's some truth to that.
It's like every day I get invited somewhere, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't go have, wine night on a Tuesday. Like, I'm like, no. Like.
Yeah, I will say that controlling the environment, like, even when I got a girlfriend, it was, hey, do you want to go to dinner and whatever else? And I'm, like, programmed to finish all the food. My girlfriend will get, like, her eyes are bigger than her stomach. She'll be like, oh, I can finish all this food, orders it all. And I'm like, well, I can't let this go to waste. So I'll, like, eat it. And I feel like your ability to recognize and have the foresight to know I can't go do X, Y, and Z thing, or, you don't tell your girlfriend, hey, you're not going to finish all that food and I'm going to finish it. And it's setting those boundaries and understanding, like, it is not personal. It's something that you're trying to mitigate the effects of, and that's okay. Like I worked with Olympians, a ton of Olympians and athletes of that caliber, where they are a finely tuned, system, and they're incredibly meticulous about the food they take in, where they go out to eat, when they eat, and as they get closer to competition, they become even more and more meticulous. And that makes sense because as you're further out, you would assume athletes want to be as particular as possible all the time, but that's a hard thing to do. I've seen it with Jordan Kilgannon. I've seen it with Jay Clark. I've seen it with you guys at certain times. I've seen it with myself. The Duke athletes, when they get closer to competition, they tend to dial in things like, the amount of vegetables that they intake, or, how many carbohydrates versus protein. And if you're a jumper, you're trying to stay as lean as possible. Like those things do happen, and it is an active choice. It is a decision to do that. That's why universities are the best farm system in the world for track and field, because they give you everything that you possibly need as easily and as accessible as possible to be successful, right? Like you have everything you could possibly need there on campus right next to you, and you have an infrastructure of people in the same exact situation as you, whether they're on your team or they have access to all those different amenities. You're in a community of people that also live a like-minded lifestyle, and if they don't, the coach is either going to get on them to do that, or they're going to get kicked off the team, and their performance is going to be detrimental. So I think community is maybe another one that we're getting to.
Like the ability to say no in your community, just to add on to that.
What's your saying in terms of saying no, Isaiah?
Focus is the quantity and quality of things you say no to.
Let me see that.
It's
tat.
On the tattoo.
Let me see that tat right there. Focus. Oh, there it is.
Yeah. There we go.
You're going to have to focus on Austin's face again. No, you'll be all right.
That's something I noticed like a lot, not as much as Isaiah in the beginning, but Isaiah like progressively started saying no and no more and being okay with saying no. A lot of people, including myself, have trouble saying no to things just because you feel like you're offending people or whatever. But one person I really noticed it with was Kilgannon when I spent some time with him. It was like so ridiculous. It would be like the most random thing that you wouldn't think would affect whatever, but he's already thinking about everything coming up. And he'll say no immediately. Like, and he has no problem saying no, and it's nothing personal.
He's kind of the epitome of, if we're talking about that definition of focus when it comes to dunking specifically. Because I viewed the same thing. I think one period of time that was actually like very not life-changing, but it changed my career as a dunker was 2021, did a contest in Vegas. And mind you, this was... I just came off a subpar year as far like performance-wise and training-wise, and then I did a contest against him. He mopped the floor with everybody, and then I remember I talked to him for a long time, and then he put me onto a book, Atomic Habits, and that's when I was like, whoa, I have shit habits. And mind you, this is compared to the top of the sport, obviously, but compared to an average person, I had good habits, but I was like, I have shit habits. That's what went through in my head. And then that's when I really got on point with like, specifically, I was going to mention this in terms of the focus thing is like not playing basketball when I'm not supposed to. That's actually, the tattoo is actually what I looked at I didn't tell you this, but John had cleared me to play basketball that day when I went to.
He mentioned it. He asked if you played, and I was like,
Yeah, and I was literally sitting there. My shoes were in the bag and stuff, and then I was sitting there, and then I looked at it, and I was like, I'm trying to get healthy. I'm trying to dunk well. I should say no to
To be
basketball.
clear, I said it's a bad idea, but you can.
Yeah.
you normally do preface things with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a terrible idea, but you could.
You could
Yeah.
do it. I mean, yeah, you could. It's probably a bad idea, but you could.
Yeah.
And I gave all the reasons why, and I'm like, you're an adult, make your own decision.
Yeah.
That is typically how I coach with my top tier guys. I'm like, you know the consequences of this. I'll remind you of them, but let you make that decision. I do think that was a big thing that needed to change in the past for you, by the way, as an aside.
That's why I think moving to 29 was useful.
Because it got you away from
Yeah, it's
basketball,
different now,
like
but
community.
Community, like me and him would just be sitting together and be like, "Want to go play basketball?"
yeah, and not just that, the people around us.
Yeah.
Like we had
Lewis.
LA, Nick, Lewis, CJ and Steven were here on the time, so it was like
Everyone would be having
living in
sessions
Orlando.
different days, so
There was
like-
you literally had the opportunity to dunk and or play basketball like basically every day or every
because
other
yeah,
day.
everyone other dunk sessions were on different days and they were hooping. They'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to dunk. I'm going to hoop," and we're like,
Yeah.
Weird for me because I've never ever struggled with that. Like in terms, I'll just be like, no. Like when it comes to compliance with training programs, to me, it's like it's on the piece of paper. I'm going to do it on the piece of paper, and I'm good at identifying what the most important things are and knowing what I have to do. I feel like it took you guys a little bit of time to learn that with me because you guys were used to before I started coaching you doing stuff like that and adding extracurricular activities, and I'd be like, these extracurricular activities have a cost and a consequence that comes along with doing them that will mean that you can't do X, Y, or Z thing. But until I gained your trust enough where you realized, yeah, maybe this stuff is actually limiting me, I'm going to keep doing it. And then eventually when you were like, oh, I stopped doing these things, I feel better, my knees feel better, I'm jumping higher, and it's like, yeah, because you changed load, which is the number one variable, you're going to perform better.
You could literally plot. Like you could plot knee pain, vertical jump gained, and ability to say no to basketball and dunking. Like you could plot all of them, and you would see a spike in health and ability to say no to dunk. Yeah, go take a call. And ability to say you could plot them, and you would see a spike right when your ability to say no to playing basketball and dunking where you're not supposed to.
We had a guy today. I think his name was maybe Jean Perez. I can't remember. I think his last name was Perez, but he's like, hey, my knee pain's coming up or whatever. And I was like, well, how much? The first thing I asked was, how much are you playing basketball? He's like, 4 to 6 times a week. And I was like, yeah. He's like, well, the skill work doesn't bother me. And I'm like, obviously it does bother you, because if it didn't bother you, then you wouldn't be feeling your knees. So I feel like, little changes like that and understanding the consequences that come along with your decision making is maybe another intangible. Like, what effect does this action that I'm about to make have on my long-term development? And I don't think a lot of people are willing to make those sacrifices. And I'm not saying the sacrifices are crazy. Like, saying no to basketball for me is not hard. For you guys, maybe that was a harder thing.
Yeah.
But for me personally, not difficult. Or if we're looking at like alcohol, for some people, it's really hard to say no to drinking on a Thursday when all their friends are out or whatever and they're in college. For me, that's easy. I don't have any problem with that. Or if it's going on a hike or something, right? The day before a dunk session. In the past, Isaiah's friends would be in town or whatever, and they'd be like, we want to do this? And he's like, yeah, I'm going to say yes to this. Like, they're never in town, I never see them, whatever. I was like, no, absolutely not. I'm not doing that. So maybe what you're saying no to is different, but the ability to identify and recognize what that is and then make that decision over time. And maybe that's another intangible is like, are you willing to change and improve? Are you willing, when you identify those issues, to make a change, or are you willing to not?
And
like,
it's
how
okay to
important
not
is it to you?
as
Yeah, it
well.
is. It's okay to not. I think you can get to
It's not gonna be
90%.
good.
You won't be your best. You
won't
can
be
be
your best,
good.
yeah.
You might not achieve your, like when you were saying, what at the very beginning of the podcast is like, what do you define as? What did I ask? What do you define as successful?
Yeah.
Like, technically, if you're at 90% of your best, by that definition, you're not successful because you haven't achieved, or let's say 85%.
Yeah.
Maybe that's good enough for you to windmill or East Bay or whatever, but that's not good enough for you to do the best you've ever done.
And everything I say, every piece of advice, every video I ever make is prefaced with, I'm trying to have you reach your genetic potential. That's what I like doing. That's what I like doing for myself. That's what I like to see in other guys. But it's okay if that's not your goal, but it's still a big difference. Like, think 90% for me, that's 5 inches less. That's a 45. I just went from, crazy performance outlier to it's good, but no one's going to bat an eye.
Yeah, no one's going to look at that and be like, wow.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. So I think the ones we've covered, your ability to say no, the community and the people that you surround yourself with and your environment, the decision to control your
It's honestly
environment.
the thing, focus.
Yeah, it's really
Your ability to
focused.
say no to things.
Yeah, I think, but if we were to go more in detail and kind of break it down, controlling your environment, whether that's your diet, where you live, the people you surround yourself with, I think is like a huge one.
Yeah. A big understanding of the process.
Yeah.
Like, you're going to get hurt. There's going to be fluctuations up and down. You're not always going to be at your best. Like, having a good understanding of that.
We could do a whole podcast
huge.
on that one, too.
I
People
think-
don't understand how hard and how long
Yeah.
it takes to get better. And we have a guarantee on the website that is, 3 inches
In 6 months.
in 6 months. And that's based on the data that we have. Used to be 6 inches in 4 weeks. Or it was like the more ridiculous you could make the claim, the more sales you made.
Yeah.
And our numbers are based off the data that we have, right? And it's not always the case. Like, there's some athletes that train with us for a year and they see an inch or two. And the reality is, okay, you're further along in your progression as an athlete. You have more training age, or maybe you have less control of your environment. I think another big one is back to the saying no to things is like, are you willing to step away from your sport to improve in this area as a better athlete? Like, most people aren't willing to do that. Or if you're a collegiate athlete, are you willing to have a conversation with your coach and say, hey, I think I need to do this to get better right now? Most people aren't willing to do that. They're not willing to open that dialogue, mostly because coaches are stubborn and whatever else. And we're on the receiving end of it, right? Like, we're the ones that are going to be cut first because we take a lower priority than the sports coach. And the sports coach doesn't necessarily care about what's going to make them better in the long term. Sometimes they're more concerned with the year of coaching that they currently have in front of them, right? Like, if you're a volleyball coach or a basketball coach, you don't care whether your athlete's a better athlete next year. You care about, are you winning this year because your contract is getting renewed yearly or whatever else, right? Or you can get fired if you have a bad year. And that short-term mindset can be really dangerous for athletes because they're an accessory to their coach's success, right? Like, that coach's success is more important than that athlete's health or their betterment of their long-term development. We've had a couple guys where I've been able to help them in the off-season, but because of their in-season demands or requirements, they have a hard time improving. Like, we have some athletes that jump 3 times as much as I would like them to because their coach requires them to, or they have club volleyball, or they have club basketball. Austin's back. But yeah, that's another big one too. Is are you willing to open a dialogue with your team coach or sports coach? I feel like that's a huge one.
And then I have 2 more. One
I don't
of
have
them
any more.
is enjoying being process driven instead of goal driven is huge.
Yeah.
And then liking suffering. Like, I always say this, like, training is all about how much suffering you can handle. Like, literally, if you think about it, lifting is kind of just torturing yourself.
Yeah.
Like, if you woke up in the middle of the night feeling the sensations you get from a 1 rep max back squat, you would be horrified.
Yeah.
Like, if you felt that in the middle of the night, but because you're doing it in the middle of training, you have context on what's happening, and like there's like almost like a euphoric feeling right after that you get from it. But it's literally torture. Like, you're torturing yourself. But you have to have this thing in your brain where you kind of like can enjoy it. Maybe it's not the actual lift itself, but how you feel afterwards. Like, something that makes you look forward to training. Like, me and John,
It's like
talked
distance
about this
runners.
before.
It's
like,
crazy.
Me and John, we love going to the gym. We love it's just fun. Like,
I literally said it in the podcast yesterday after like suffering. I was like, oh, I feel so much better when I'm lifting. Like, it's just so much more fun. Like, I just can step away from everything, focus on what I'm doing. I know it improves me, makes me a better athlete, and it's just fun. I just like it. I like lifting.
I like lifting a lot more this year, like after spending it with you guys, like this, because I feel like the times that we lifted in the past, I wasn't really passionate about it, and I was more goal oriented, and I freaking hated like feeling like crap. But now, I definitely enjoy the weight room a lot more with you guys. Like, I feel like I look forward to that daily. It used to be something I felt like I had. I'm like, oh, I have to go lift now. And it's like, now it's like, cool, it's lift time, you know?
no, I would
crazy.
I would be lifting
I'm like an ego lifter on my lifts.
Yeah, I would be
My calves.
I would be lifting just as hard and just as consistently if like it did nothing for my vertical or if I stopped jumping. But I've always been like that. Like I watch freaking bodybuilding videos on my free time.
That's
fun.
what we've that's what we've discussed though. Like we both said, once we're done dunking, we're probably gonna be bodybuilders because there's nothing like, like once it's like we're still gonna work out. Like
I've come to terms. Though I used to think that way, but I've come to terms with the fact that I'm gonna be trying to dunk probably.
all right, well, I'm saying
So I'm like really old.
I'm saying if you can't, like obviously, like
I would
there is a
still
possibility.
train as if
Well,
I could.
my
I would still
perspective
train
has
as
changed
if I
on that
could.
though, because I feel like
I
if
feel
you
like we're gonna be
can't,
over
it
50.
probably means you can't lift as well, except like upper body maybe.
And you
like,
probably need to change your training so that you can.
Yeah. Because what's changed my view on that is like I see Andy, right, in his 50s, jumping his highest ever, and then the other day I was on Instagram. This dude was interviewing a guy at the basketball court. He was 74. And,
Really?
And he was playing basketball, like pickup basketball, and he gave a few things actually.
What did he say?
Of like he's like one, I play a couple hours every day and I never stopped. Like throughout his life, he literally never stopped playing. Which is like, I've come to realize that dunking is almost like the fountain of youth. Like,
Yeah.
because if you keep dunking, you don't stop, and you maintain those qualities, it maintains your health really freaking well. Like your tendons and stuff like that are gonna be resilient. So that was one of them. The other one, he said he's only been drunk twice in his life.
Really?
Yeah, doesn't drink. He said he drunk at his like wedding and then like some other random time when he's like 18.
I'm convinced alcohol is like super bad. Like I
Yeah.
know I'm
I think that's pretty objective, Austin.
No. The thing is, like, I believe, like, there is, we've talked about it, like, the estrogen levels and things of that nature, but I do think, like, I don't know, I just...
That's like the 5%.
I don't think every time I am the best at dunking and shredded, I am sober as can be.
Yeah.
Like, it happened in 2019 when I was doing, like, all that 360s and 2-foot jumps and this and that. I was super shredded. I was, like, 150 then.
Yeah.
And then 2022, I was sober for the most part of the year. And even then, I like... When I came back and started drinking, I wasn't drinking that much because my tolerance was so low. Like I think it's just.
I see the same thing. Like when I look at pro dunkers and the guys that make it the farthest, like the guys who ended earlier were heavy. They abuse their bodies, drinking, drugs, and that type of thing. The guys that make it later are really disciplined about their drinking habits.
Yeah. Well, I feel like that's a good place to stop. We've been going
For
for a while talking about this, and yeah, I feel like look at these guys looking at the timestamp. Don't worry about that. You're not the tech guy.
If you want to sign up, wait, hold up.
Okay. All right. Tell him.
If you want to sign up and get coached by us, go to THPstrength.com. Use the code THP for 10% off of your first month. Are you disciplined? Do you lose sleep because you think about dunking at night? Do you want to reach your athletic potential? Well, you know where to sign up to get coached by us.
We'll see you guys tomorrow. And if you're going to dunk camp, cut your sets in half. Bye.